This is Scott Becker with the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. We try to bring you 1 to 2 business or market insight episodes a day, sometimes a comedic episode. In addition, we also bring you about an interview a day with a brilliant business leader. Today's discussion is with David Pivnick. David's one of the brightest people that we ever get a chance to visit with. He was valedictorian of his law school class. He's also a leading partner at McGuireWoods, and an absolutely gifted person. We're going to talk to David, and the title of today's podcast is Leadership and Investing with David Pivnick. We're going to talk to David a few of his thoughts on how he views things from a leadership perspective, how he views things from a investing perspective, how he thinks about those things. He's been highly successful, and we like to pick his brain. He's a little bit putting on the spot because I didn't tell him what we'd be talking about today, but we'll enjoy it nevertheless. David, why don't you take a moment first and introduce yourself, and then we'll talk a little bit about sort of thoughts on leadership. You get a chance to watch. I know that you were watching one of our leaders this past week, Tim Fry, who I know you've got great regard for, and some of the qualities that you look at in leaders, in thoughtfulness and in carefulness and so forth. And then also about investing. And how do you think about investing as you sort of move forward and evolve in your career and so forth? How do you think about those things? Can you first start by just taking a second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Thanks for having me on, and always a pleasure to connect. I'm David Pivnick, as you said. I'm a partner at McGuireWoods, practicing, heavily in the area of healthcare and private equity litigation, most commonly defending government investigations and responding to False Claims Act disputes on the defense side. Work in the Chicago office, live in Illinois, and very happy here. Grew up in Toronto and have a wonderful wife and 3 kids. So spent a lot of time with them and doing family activities and sports. So that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And take a moment on leadership. You spend a lot of time looking at leaders, observing leaders. You and I and one of our other partners talked a lot about one of the qualities of a great emerging leader in the firm yesterday. Talk about what are some of those qualities that you see that you respect in leaders and that people ought to think about in modeling their own leadership careers.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I think there's a lot of skills and traits that go into being a great leader. One of them is being able to relate well to other people and pick up a discussion and develop, a connection pretty quickly with folks, whether it's people up the ladder, down the ladder, on your same sort of tier in the corporate structure. So one of the things is sort of an innate ability to make conversation, to be collegial, and to connect with people in a real way. And I think one of the leaders, I mean, this is not who we were speaking about yesterday, but, John Harmon, who's the chairman of McGuireWoods, is one of those people where it takes exactly 30 seconds in any conversation with him to want to continue the discussion and to know that he's just an incredibly warm and engaging person. And it comes to him very naturally and allows him to build really instantaneous connections with everybody I see him interacting with. So I think that innate ability to connect is critical. I think the ability to have foresight and vision and to sort of plan for the entity or the team that you're leading is critical. People need to know where they're going and need to have a leader that's sort of well positioned to help them get there. And that's, I think, critical to the role of a good leader is being able to identify what the goals and the direction is, and then helping shepherd people along in that direction. And then I think another important skill that the best leaders have is the ability to both identify the right talent and the right fits for their team. And sometimes that involves, funneling people off of the team. Sometimes it involves adding to the team. Sometimes it's reallocating resources, but figuring out both the right resources and where there are gaps and where there are strengths and leveraging those, but then also deploying people in the right way, because a good team is going to have folks, again, business or sports or law, folks who have different roles, different skill sets, different abilities. And so figuring out the best way to put people in a place to succeed and then spurring on that success is sort of critical to the role of a leader.
And we talked about one example of leadership, that ability to connect that John Harmon has. We also talked about this different type of leader that has great personal skills, but also just immediately sort of develops trust in people and is so thoughtful and so deep. How do you think about those leadership characteristics, and why does that resonate so well with so many of us?
I mean, those are absolutely important characteristics. I mean, you're as a leader, as someone who's managing a team, you're going to be asking other people to perform and to do things. And so making sure that people understand where you're coming from and that you're able to connect with them and build that rapport on an immediate level and a deep level is significant. It is a lot easier for people to go work hard and perform where they have a connection, they understand the broader mission, and they're sort of supportive and feeling supported by the person who's leading them. I think it leads to a lot of questions and pushback and resistance, or worse, where folks are second guessing the leader, don't see the messaging, in the right way, or think there's a real gap in how things are being positioned. So I think that's absolutely critical to be able to have those connections and make those interpersonal relationships. Sometimes it's a friendship, sometimes it's just a strong personal connection in the workplace, but being able to do that, I think can really help to draw strong performance.
Thank you. And I want to switch topics to us for a second to investing. And I know you're not a professional investor, but a really, really smart person who's working hard to develop financial safety for the family and all those kinds of things. How do you think about investing? Do you do it yourself? Do you use an advisor? Do you pick individual stocks? Do you invest in index funds? Any thoughts on how you overall think about it?
I've been relatively conservative in the way I invest. Right now I've handled much of it myself, and it's heavily focused on index funds and on safer investments that are short-term but guaranteed, no risk but low interest, and a mix of that and index funds. As I've gotten older and as I having more funds to invest, I intend actually this year, that's one of the things that my wife and I've talked about, is starting to work more closely with the financial advisor and probably diversifying a bit. But right now it's been heavily focused on index funds and safer guaranteed investments, understanding there's a relatively lower return on those.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, for people that didn't grow up with money or particular money, there's just this great concern about making sure a certain portion of that is safe, because it's almost, one recognizes how hard it is to actually make some money and put some money away, and the concept of losing money is really scary. No one wants to lose money. So hitting this right balance between investing, index funds and treasuries or CDs or whatever it is, and hitting that right balance is a real concern for people, regardless of what circumstances you're in, I guess, right? I mean, we all think about, it's so hard to make it, we don't want to lose it. And at the same time, we have to have enough risk involved and enough of equities that we can grow our portfolio and beat inflation and all those and retire well.
Yep, that you hit the nail on the head. And certainly the way Haley and my wife and I have approached it to date is on the more conservative side of things, I think. And that's intentionally so. We have a long pathway ahead where we'll be continuing to work and earn and adding to the pot, but also want to be prudent and recognize that the safer the investment, we're leaving money on the table as well in terms of what the returns reasonably could be with broader but not irrational amounts of risk. So trying to balance those things.
We couldn't agree more. David, as always, again, we're talking today leadership and investing with David Pivnick. For those who don't know David, one of the brightest people you'll ever get a chance to visit with, incredibly gifted. Thank you for joining us today on the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. We often skip subjects around with David. Next week might be sports with David Pivnick, but we enjoy visiting with him. Just brilliant. Thank you to our listeners for listening, and thank you for David for joining us, and to our wonderful producer, Chanel Bunger. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Thank you, Chanel.